The ground shook under New Haven Colony like an earthquake was hitting them hard. People ran from their homes screaming as the warning sirens filled the air with their loud noise. Commander Jake Morrison stood at his command center window and watched something terrible coming toward their town. It was bigger than any building they had and moved like a hungry animal looking for food. The creature was 30 feet tall with black armor covering its whole body. Its claws were as long as a person and sharp enough to cut through metal like it was paper. Yellow eyes glowed in its huge head, and when it opened its mouth to roar, the sound broke windows 3 blocks away. This was the Zerathi Warbeast, and it had come to destroy everything human on this planet. Jake grabbed his radio and called all his soldiers. He had been a commander for 20 years and fought in many battles, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The reports from other colonies had been clear. This thing could not be stopped. 3 human settlements were already gone, and only empty dirt remained where families had lived just days before. The Warbeast moved through their outer, walls like they were made of sand. The concrete barriers that took months to build crumbled under its massive feet. Defense turrets fired their biggest guns at the creature, but the energy beams just bounced off its armor. The alien war machine did not even slow down as it walked toward the center of town. Claire Barnes held her 8-year-old daughter Lucy close as they ran to the underground shelter. Lucy carried her old stuffed rabbit that she had owned since she was 3 years old. The little girl did not cry like the other children. Instead, she listened carefully to the sounds coming from above. The creature was making noises that sounded almost like words, but not in any language she knew. Soldiers in green uniforms ran past them carrying weapons and looking scared. Lucy had never seen grown-ups look so afraid before. Her mother pulled her faster toward the big metal doors that led underground where they would be safe. At least that was what everyone hoped. The shelter was full of people sitting on the floor and talking in quiet voices. Babies were crying and some adults were praying. Lucy sat in the corner with her rabbit and watched everything around her. The ceiling shook every time the monster took a step above them. Dust fell down like snow and made everyone cough. Captain Rick Davis gathered his best fighters near the colony center. These were men and women who had trained their whole lives for battle. They carried plasma rifles and wore thick armor that could stop most alien weapons. But Davis knew they were walking into a fight they could not win. The Warbeast was hunting people like they were small animals. It would grab someone with its huge claws and throw them far away. When it roared, the sound made people fall down and cover their ears. The creature seemed to enjoy causing fear and pain. This was what it was made to do. Dr. Helen Ross worked at her computer trying to find some weakness in the alien monster. She was the smartest person in the colony when it came to studying alien life forms. Her screens showed pictures and data about the Warbeast, but nothing gave her hope. The Zerathi Empire had built the perfect killer. The creature's skin was harder than tank armor. Its bones were made of metal that could not break. Its muscles were 10 times stronger than any Earth animal. Even its blood was poisonous to humans. Every part of the Warbeast was designed to destroy human life, and nothing could stop it. Jake Morrison watched his town burning through the command center cameras. The creature moved from building to building looking for people to kill. It would stick its huge head through windows and grab anyone hiding inside. The lucky ones died quickly. Others were carried away screaming. Lucy Barnes pressed her ear to the shelter wall and listened to the sounds above. Other children were hiding under blankets or holding on to their parents. But Lucy was different. She heard something in the creature's voice that nobody else noticed. Between the roars and the sounds of breaking buildings, there was something else. Something that sounded sad and lonely. The Warbeast had destroyed half the town in just 2 hours. Emergency teams could not get close enough to help the wounded. Fire trucks could not put out the flames because the creature would attack anything that moved. New Haven was dying, and there was nothing anyone could do to save it. As night began to fall, the monster's yellow eyes glowed brighter in the darkness. It had not eaten or rested since arriving. The Warbeast was built to fight and kill until nothing human remained alive. Tomorrow, it would move on to the next colony and do the same thing all over again. But deep underground, a small girl hugged her stuffed rabbit and wondered why something so strong and scary sounded so very sad when it thought. Nobody was listening. Captain Rick Davis checked his weapon one last time before leading his squad into the burning streets. 20 of the best soldiers in the colony followed him through the smoke and rubble. They all knew this was probably their last mission, but nobody talked about it. Someone had to try to save the people trapped near the town center. The Warbeast had cornered a group of families in the main plaza. Men, women, and children huddled together behind broken cars while the monster circled them, like a cat playing with mice. Davis could see the creature through his scope. It was even bigger up close than in the pictures. Its claws scraped against the ground, making sparks fly. Sergeant Bill Cooper carried the biggest gun they had. The plasma cannon was so heavy it took 2 people to lift it normally, but Cooper was the strongest man in their unit. He set it up behind a pile of concrete blocks and aimed at the creature's head. The weapon charged up with a high whining sound. The first shot hit the Warbeast right between its glowing eyes. The energy beam was hot enough to melt steel, but it just made the creature turn around and look at them. There was no damage at all on its armored face. The monster tilted its huge head like it was curious about these small humans who dared to shoot at it. Davis ordered his team to spread out and attack from different sides. Marines ran between the broken buildings firing, their rifles as fast as they could. Hundreds of energy bolts hit the creature, but they all bounced off its black armor. The Warbeast did not even seem bothered by the attack. Then the monster moved faster than anything that big should be able to move. It leapt across the plaza in one jump and landed right next to 3 soldiers. Its massive claw swept sideways and sent all 3 men flying through the air. They hit a wall 30 feet away and did not get up. Cooper kept firing the plasma cannon even as the creature charged toward him. The weapon overheated and started smoking, but he did not stop shooting. The Warbeast opened its mouth and roared, so loud that windows broke all around the plaza. Cooper fell to his knees holding his ears, and the creature grabbed him with one claw. Davis watched helplessly as his friend was lifted high into the air. He emptied his rifle into the monster's arm, but the bullets did nothing. Cooper tried to break free, but the Warbeast's grip was too strong. With a quick motion, the creature threw the sergeant across the street, like he weighed nothing at all. More soldiers fell as the battle continued. The creature seemed to know exactly where each person was hiding. It would smash through buildings and grab people before they could run away. Every human weapon they tried had no effect on its armor. The Warbeast was built to be unstoppable, and it was proving that with every attack. Underground in the shelter, Dr. Helen Ross worked frantically at her computer. She had studied alien biology for 15 years and knew more about different life forms than anyone else in the colony. But all her knowledge was useless against this creature. The Zarathi had built something beyond anything science could explain. Her screens showed detailed scans of the Warbeast's body structure. Its bones were made from metals that did not exist in nature. Its muscles had been grown in laboratories and changed with genetic engineering. Even its brain had been modified to remove anything except the desire to hunt and kill humans. Ross ran test after test, looking for some weakness they could use. She checked for sensitive spots that might hurt the creature. She looked for organs. That might be important. She studied its movements to find patterns they could predict. But every scan showed the same terrible truth. The Warbeast was perfect. Above ground, the battle was almost over. Only 5 soldiers remained alive, and they were running low on ammunition. Davis and his team retreated to a small building near the edge of the plaza. The families they had tried to save were still trapped with nowhere to run. The Warbeast walked slowly toward the building where the soldiers were hiding. It was not in any hurry now. The creature knew it had won this fight just like all the others. Its yellow eyes scanned the broken windows looking for movement inside. When it found the humans, it would finish what it started. Lucy Barnes sat in the corner of the underground shelter, listening to the sounds of fighting above. Her mother Claire tried to keep her from hearing the screams and explosions, but the little girl heard everything. She held her stuffed rabbit tight and closed her eyes to think better. The other children in the shelter were crying or sleeping. Some adults were praying while others just sat quietly waiting for the end to come. Nobody believed the soldiers could win against something so powerful. They had all heard the reports from other colonies that had tried to fight the Warbeast. But Lucy heard something different in the monster's roars. Between the angry sounds and the noise of destruction, there were other sounds, softer sounds that reminded her of the sick animals her father used to help before he died. Animals in pain made noises like that when they thought nobody was listening. The shelter shook as something big hit the ground above them. Dust fell from the ceiling and people moved closer together. The emergency lights flickered and went out for a few seconds before coming back on. Everyone knew the creature was getting closer to finding their hiding place. Davis looked out the window and saw the Warbeast standing just 50 feet away. The monster was staring right at him with those terrible yellow eyes. Behind the creature, he could see the broken bodies of his soldiers scattered across the plaza. So many good people had died trying to stop this thing. The captain had one grenade left on his belt. He knew it would not hurt the creature, but maybe it would distract it long enough for the civilians to run. Davis pulled the pin and prepared to make his last stand against the unstoppable alien war machine that had come to destroy his world. Lucy Barnes made a decision that would change everything. While her mother Claire was talking quietly with other adults about their hopeless situation, the 8-year-old girl slipped away from her corner. She moved carefully between the sleeping children and scared families toward the heavy metal door that led outside. The shelter was dark except for a few emergency lights that cast strange shadows on the walls. Most people were too worried about their own problems to notice one small girl walking toward the exit. Lucy held her stuffed rabbit under one arm and moved like she was playing a game of hide-and-seek. Claire Barnes turned around to check on her daughter and felt her heart stop. The spot where Lucy had been sitting was empty. She looked around frantically, calling her daughter's name in a loud whisper. Other parents helped her search, but the little girl was nowhere to be found in the underground room. Above ground, Lucy pushed open the shelter door and stepped into a world that looked like the end of everything. Buildings were broken and burning. Cars were crushed flat. The air smelled like smoke and something else that made her nose wrinkle. But she was not afraid. She had heard something in the monster's voice that made her curious instead of scared. The Warbeast was across town near the main plaza where it had trapped the last soldiers. Lucy could hear its roars echoing between the broken buildings. She started walking toward the sound while holding her rabbit tight against her chest. Her small feet crunched on broken glass and pieces of concrete as she made her way through the destroyed streets. Captain Davis threw his grenade at the approaching monster and watched it explode harmlessly against the creature's armored chest. The Warbeast did not even pause in its slow walk toward the building where he was hiding. Behind him, 3 other soldiers prepared to make their final stand with whatever ammunition they had left. The creature reached the building and pressed its massive face against the window. Its yellow eyes looked directly at Davis, who was standing just 10 feet away inside. The monster's hot breath fogged up the glass, while its claws scraped against the concrete walls. It seemed to be enjoying the fear it saw in the human soldiers. Lucy heard the sound of breaking glass and heavy footsteps as she got closer to the plaza. She stayed behind piles of rubble and broken cars to avoid being seen. The little girl was good at hiding because she had played games like this with her father before he went away to fight in the war and never came back. When she reached the edge of the plaza, Lucy saw the Warbeast for the first time with her own eyes. It was much bigger than she had imagined from the pictures on the news. The creature's black armor shined in the firelight from burning buildings. Its claws were longer. Then her whole body and its teeth looked sharp enough to bite through anything. But Lucy was not looking at the monster's scary parts. She was watching its face and listening to the sounds it made between the loud roars. There was something about the way its head moved and how its eyes looked that reminded her of the hurt animals her father used to help at his veterinary clinic. The Warbeast grabbed the front wall of the building where Davis was hiding and started pulling it apart. Concrete blocks fell to the ground as the structure began to collapse. The captain and his men ran toward the back exit, but there was nowhere left to go. The creature would catch them in seconds. From her hiding spot, Lucy could see the trapped families huddled behind some overturned vehicles in the center of the plaza. There were maybe 20 people, including several children who looked about her. Age. They were all staring at the monster in terror while their parents held them close and whispered that everything would be okay. Lucy made another decision. She stood up from behind the broken car where she had been hiding and walked out into the open plaza. Her small figure looked tiny compared to all the destruction around her. She carried her stuffed rabbit in both hands and walked slowly toward the enormous alien creature that was busy tearing apart the soldiers' hiding place. The Warbeast sensed movement behind it and turned around to see what new prey had appeared. Its glowing yellow eyes focused on the little girl who was walking straight toward it without running or screaming. The creature had never seen a human behave this way before. Usually they ran away or shot at it or begged for their lives. Lucy stopped about 50 feet away from the monster and looked up at its massive head. The creature was so tall that she had to lean her neck back as far as it would go just to see its face. The Warbeast stared down at her and tilted its head to one side like a confused animal trying to understand something new. For the first time since arriving at New Haven, the alien war machine hesitated. Its programming told it to kill all humans on sight, but something about this small child made it pause. The creature took one slow step toward Lucy and then stopped again. Its massive claws scraped against the concrete, but it did not attack. Captain Davis and his remaining soldiers watched in amazement from the ruins of their building. The unstoppable killing machine that had destroyed their entire town was standing perfectly still while looking at an 8-year-old girl. Nobody moved or made a sound, afraid that any noise might break whatever strange spell was happening. Lucy was not afraid of the creature, even though it was the most dangerous thing anyone had ever seen. She had spent her whole short life around animals and could tell when something was hurt or scared, even if it looked mean on the outside. The Warbeast was making soft noises between its roars that sounded like whimpers of pain. The little girl reached into her pocket and pulled out a small electronic device that she always carried with her. It was a translator that her father had given her to help communicate with the different alien workers who lived in their colony. She had been secretly recording the monster's sounds since she first heard them in the shelter. Lucy held up the translator and pressed a button to start, playing back the recordings she had made. The device processed the creature's vocalizations and tried to find patterns that matched known languages in its database. Most of the sounds were just roars and growls, but buried underneath there were traces of something else, something that sounded almost like words. The Warbeast lowered its massive head closer to the ground where Lucy was standing. Its yellow eyes focused on the small device in her hands that was making strange beeping sounds. The creature had never heard those particular noises before, and something deep in its modified brain was trying to remember what they meant. Dr. Helen Ross sat in the underground shelter staring at her computer screen in complete shock. She had been monitoring the battle through security cameras scattered around the colony and could not believe what she was seeing. An 8-year-old girl was standing face to face with the most dangerous predator in the galaxy, and the monster had stopped its attack. Ross quickly switched between different camera angles to get a better view of what was happening in the plaza. The Warbeast was crouched down like a giant cat, studying something interesting on the ground. Its massive claws were only inches away from Lucy, but the creature was not moving to attack. The doctor started running new scans of the monster using every sensor she could access remotely. The readings were different now than they had been during the fighting. The creature's heart rate had slowed down and its brain activity was showing patterns she had never seen before. Something fundamental was changing inside the alien war machine. Lucy watched the translator's screen as it processed more of the creature's vocalizations. Most of the sounds were still classified as aggressive roars, but the device had found something else buried in the audio patterns. There were traces of what appeared to be a completely different language, mixed in with all the violence and anger. The little girl was good with languages because her father had taught her to communicate with many different types of aliens. She knew that sometimes when creatures were hurt or scared, they would mix different ways of speaking together. The translator was showing her that the Warbeast was doing exactly that. Captain Davis crept closer to where Lucy was standing, trying to get into position to grab the child if the monster decided to attack. But the creature seemed completely focused on the sounds coming from her translator and was not paying attention to anything else around it. The massive predator was acting more like a curious pet than a killing machine. The Warbeast made a new sound that was softer and higher pitched than its usual roars. Lucy's translator immediately started working to analyze this vocalization. The device's screen showed that this particular sound was much closer to actual language than anything else the creature had produced since arriving at the colony. Ross watched her sensors detect massive changes in the monster's biochemistry. Stress hormones that had been flooding its system were starting to decrease. Chemicals associated with aggression were dropping to levels she had never recorded before. It was like watching a completely different creature slowly emerging from inside the war machine. The doctor realized something incredible was happening and started searching through her xenobiology databases. She pulled up files on the original species that the Zerathi had used to create their Warbeast. What she found made her gasp out loud, despite the dangerous situation they were all in. The base creature that had been modified to make the Warbeast was not originally a predator at all. It had been a peaceful herbivore from a planet called Gentle Valley. The original species was known for its high intelligence and strong emotional bonds, especially with young members of other species. They were natural caretakers who had been completely peaceful until the Zerathi captured them. Lucy looked up at the massive creature that was still crouched down near her. Its yellow eyes did not look as scary now that she was closer to them. There was something behind the artificial glow that reminded her of the gentle animals her father had cared for. Animals that had been hurt and needed someone to help them feel better. The translator beeped and displayed a message that made Lucy's heart race with excitement. It had found enough language patterns to attempt a basic communication link. The device could now try to convert simple human words into sounds that the creature might be able to understand based on its original species' vocal patterns. Ross read through more files about the original Gentle Valley creatures and understood what the Zerathi had done to create their weapon. They had taken peaceful, intelligent beings and used genetic modification to turn them into monsters. But the original personality and emotions were still buried somewhere inside the artificial programming. The Warbeast made another soft sound and extended one massive claw very slowly toward Lucy. The little girl did not back away, even though the claw was bigger than her entire body. She could see that the creature was being careful not to hurt her. Its movements were gentle, despite its enormous size and obvious strength. Captain Davis held his breath as he watched the alien's claw. "Stop just inches from touching the child." The monster's yellow eyes were fixed on Lucy's face with an expression that looked almost desperate, like it was trying to communicate something important, but could not find the right way to do it. Lucy pressed a button on her translator to switch it from recording mode to communication mode. The device would now try to convert her words into sounds that matched the creature's original language patterns. She took a deep breath and decided to ask the question that had been bothering her since she first heard the monster's roars. The little girl looked directly into the Warbeast's glowing eyes and spoke in a clear voice that carried across the silent plaza. Every person watching held their breath as her words went into the translator and came out as a series of musical tones and soft growling sounds that seemed to bypass all the creature's programming. Ross watched her sensors go crazy as the creature's entire nervous system responded to whatever Lucy had just said. Brain activity spiked in areas associated with memory and emotion, while stress hormones dropped even further. The monster's artificial conditioning was breaking down as something much deeper and more fundamental took control. The Warbeast's eyes went wide, and its massive body began to tremble like it was fighting against invisible chains. Tears started flowing down its armored face as memories that had been buried for years began flooding back into its consciousness. The unstoppable alien killing machine was remembering what it had been before the Zarathi turned it into a weapon of war. Lucy looked at the massive creature that was shaking and crying in front of her. She could see that something inside it was fighting to get out. The little girl held her translator close to her mouth and spoke the words that had been in her heart, since she first heard the monster's painful roars echoing through the destroyed town. The translator converted her simple question into the musical language of the original Gentle Valley species. The sounds that came from the device were soft and caring, like a mother talking to a hurt child. They carried no anger or fear, just pure, innocent curiosity about why something so big and strong was making sounds of sadness. The Warbeast heard those gentle tones, and something deep inside its modified brain exploded like a dam breaking. The artificial programming that the Zarathi had built into its mind started falling apart as the original personality fought to break free. The creature had not heard its native language spoken with kindness in so many years that it had forgotten such a thing was possible. Captain Davis watched in amazement as the unstoppable killing machine collapsed to its knees in the middle of the plaza. The creature's massive claws scraped against the concrete as it tried to support its trembling body. Tears poured from its yellow eyes like rivers while it made soft whimpering sounds that had nothing to do with aggression or hunting. Doctor. Ross stared at her computer screens as every sensor she was monitoring went completely wild. The creature's brain activity was showing patterns she had never seen before in any living being. It was like watching two completely different minds fighting for control of the same body. The artificial war machine programming was losing the battle against something much older and stronger. Lucy stepped closer to the crying monster and reached out her small hand to touch its massive claw. The Warbeast felt her tiny fingers against its armored skin, and the sensation sent shock waves through its entire nervous system. It had been so long since anything had touched it with gentleness, instead of trying to hurt or control it. The creature's original memories came flooding back in a rush that was both wonderful and terrible. It remembered being young and free on the green hills of Gentle Valley. It remembered playing with others of its kind, and eating sweet grass that grew by clear streams. Most importantly, it remembered caring for the young of all species who came to them for protection and love. But along with the good memories came the horrible ones. The creature remembered the day the Zarathi ships came to Gentle Valley. It remembered being captured along with many others of its kind. It remembered the pain of the experiments and modifications that turned peaceful plant eaters into weapons of war against their will. Ross read through more files about the genetic modifications the Zarathi had used. The aliens had not just changed the creatures' bodies, they had tried to completely destroy their original personalities. But they had made one critical mistake. They had left the deep emotional centers of the brain mostly intact because they needed the creatures to be intelligent enough to follow complex battle orders. The Warbeast looked down at Lucy with eyes that were no longer glowing yellow with artificial rage. The genetic modifications were still there, but the programming that controlled them was breaking down. For the first time since its capture, the creature was thinking with its own mind instead of following orders burned into its brain. Lucy could see the change happening in the monster's face. The angry expression was melting away and being replaced by something that looked lost and confused. She used her translator to speak more words of comfort in the creature's original language. Simple phrases about friendship and safety that her father had taught her to use with frightened animals. The gentle sounds from the translator reached parts of the creature's mind that had been locked away for years. It remembered being called by name instead of just being known as a weapon. It remembered having friends who cared about its feelings instead of masters who only wanted it to kill. The Warbeast was remembering what it meant to be a person instead of just a tool. Captain Davis slowly stood up from his hiding place and walked toward where Lucy was standing with the now peaceful creature. His soldiers followed him with their weapons lowered. Nobody was afraid anymore. They could all see that whatever had been controlling the monster was gone, and something completely different had taken its place. The families that had been trapped in the plaza came out from behind their hiding places. Children who had been crying with terror just minutes before now stared in wonder at the massive alien that was sitting quietly next to little Lucy Barnes. The creature made soft musical sounds that the translator converted into words of apology and sadness. Ross connected her communication system to Lucy's translator so everyone in the colony could hear what the creature was trying to say. The words that came through the speakers were simple but filled with deep emotion. The Warbeast was sorry for all the pain it had caused. It had not wanted to hurt anyone, but had been forced to by programming it could not resist. Lucy looked up at the creature that was now gentle despite its fearsome appearance. She asked through the translator if it had a real name instead of just being called Warbeast. The answer came back in musical tones that meant something like flower singer in the original Gentle Valley language. The little girl smiled and told Flower Singer that it was safe now. Nobody would force it to hurt people anymore. She explained that humans were good at helping creatures who had been hurt and that they would find a way to remove the bad programming completely. For the first time in years, the former Warbeast felt something it had almost forgotten existed. Hope filled Flower Singer's heart as it realized that the nightmare might finally be over. The creature gently touched Lucy's hand with one massive claw and made sounds that meant thank you in a language of kindness instead of war. The unstoppable alien killing machine had been defeated not by weapons or violence, but by a single word spoken with love by a human child who refused to see it as a monster. The transformation of the Warbeast into Flower Singer spread like wildfire through the galaxy. News networks across hundreds of worlds carried the story of how a single human child had defeated the Zarathi Empire's most powerful weapon using nothing but kindness and understanding. The video of Lucy Barnes standing fearlessly next to the massive creature became the most watched broadcast in galactic history. Commander Jake Morrison stood in the rebuilt plaza of New Haven Colony, watching Lucy play with a group of children while Flower Singer sat nearby like a gentle giant guardian. The creature had stayed with the humans after its programming was completely removed by Dr. Ross and her team of xenobiologists. It refused to leave the little girl who had given it back its true self. Captain Davis and his surviving soldiers had become heroes throughout human space, but they all insisted that the real hero was an 8-year-old girl with a stuffed rabbit and a translator device. They told everyone who would listen that Lucy had done something no army could accomplish. She had looked past the surface of a monster and seen the hurt person trapped inside. The Zarathi Empire was in complete chaos after losing their ultimate weapon. Other species that had been forced to serve them began rebelling when they learned that even the unstoppable Warbeast could be defeated by simple compassion. The alien overlords, who had ruled through fear for centuries, suddenly found their power crumbling as their subjects remembered what freedom felt like. Dr. Helen Ross published her research about the genetic modifications used to create the Warbeast and the methods needed to reverse them. Medical teams across the galaxy used her work to help other modified creatures that the Zarathi had turned into weapons. Within months, dozens of peaceful species were freed from their artificial programming and returned to their original natures. Lucy became the youngest person ever to receive the Galactic Peace Prize, but she was more interested in teaching other children how to use translator devices to communicate with different alien species. She traveled to colonies throughout human space, showing kids that most creatures who seemed scary were just afraid or hurt and needed someone to listen to them with kindness. Flower Singer learned to speak human languages and told the story of Gentle Valley to anyone who wanted to hear it. The creature described how its people had lived in harmony with nature and each other before the Zarathi came. It talked about the pain of being forced to hurt innocent people and the joy of being free to choose kindness again. The former Warbeast became an ambassador between different species, helping to negotiate peace treaties and resolve conflicts through understanding instead of violence. Its massive size and fearsome appearance made it an impressive figure at diplomatic meetings, but its gentle nature and wise words were what actually brought enemies together. Claire Barnes watched her daughter playing in the garden behind their new house with a mixture of pride and amazement. Lucy had grown up to become exactly the kind of person her father would have wanted her to be. Someone who saw the good in all living beings and was brave enough to reach out to those who needed help most. The story of how the Warbeast was defeated became required reading in schools throughout human space. Children learned that the strongest weapons were not guns or bombs, but empathy and the willingness to listen to others even when they seemed dangerous or different. Teachers used Lucy's example to show that age and size did not matter when it came to making the galaxy a better place. Commander Morrison often walked through the memorial garden that had been built where the old plaza used to be. The names of all the soldiers who had died fighting the Warbeast were carved into stone surrounded by flowers from dozens of different worlds. But the centerpiece of the memorial was not about war or death. It was a statue showing a small girl reaching out to touch the claw of a massive creature with kindness in her eyes. The Zarathi Empire eventually collapsed completely as more and more of their modified creatures were freed and turned against them. The former slave species formed a new alliance based on cooperation and mutual respect instead of fear and domination. They called themselves the Gentle Valley Coalition, in honor of Flower Singer's people and the peaceful way of life they represented. Years later, when Lucy was grown up with children of her own, she would still visit the memorial garden with Flower Singer, who had become her closest friend and protector. The creature would tell her kids stories about their mother's courage and how she had saved not just one colony, but helped bring peace to the entire galaxy. The simple question that had started it all became a greeting used by many species when they met for the first time. Instead of showing weapons or making threats, they would ask each other why they were sad and then listen carefully to the answer. This small change in how beings communicated with each other prevented countless wars and brought understanding between peoples who had been enemies for generations. Lucy Barnes proved that the greatest power in the universe was not the ability to destroy, but the courage to care about others, even when it seemed impossible or dangerous. Her legacy lived on in every child who learned to see past appearances and recognize the person hiding inside every creature they met. The galaxy became a brighter and safer place because one little girl refused to believe that anyone or anything was truly a monster. The unstoppable Warbeast that had terrorized worlds and destroyed armies was brought down by a single word spoken with love. That word was not a weapon or a command, but simply a question asked by someone who cared enough to listen to the answer. In the end, it was not human technology or military might that saved the day, but the most human quality of all, the ability to recognize pain in others and offer comfort instead of fear.